Welcome to TestTube, a place where we can share our knowledge through short videos. Even you can contribute to us by making a small video of any problem that you face in your life and how you have solved it. The video can be as short and as simple as possible, and you upload it in your Google Drive and share that link to us through that email that is shown over in this video. This way we can build a rich library having solution to any problem that anybody could possibly face in their life, and they can find a solution over here in this comment space. And by the way, the video will be uploaded with your name on it so that you can have all the credit for this. Thank you. Okay, in this video we are going to discuss what are the different web locators that we have in Selenium and Katalon Studio that are used to identify web elements in the web page of a given application under test or application under automation. Alright, so first, and also we are going to discuss why do we have to know how to build or identify web locators manually when we have different tools like Crowpath and Selectors Hub. Though they are available, it is still essential that you should know how to choose the web locator manually so that it will be helpful at some points in building your own and unique web locator which can't be achieved by these tools. Okay, so in order to explain that, I will demonstrate you a small example. So this is the orange HRM page. Under recruitments tab we can see there are a list of candidates available, right? Okay, these are the list of candidates and these are their profiles. And for example, if you try to inspect this element, we will see this is the element and this is the node for this application in a DOM. And when you see this node, I'll try to use selectors hub. So I have selectors hub add-in already, extension already in or here. So it looks like it is very easy, right? So it is actually easy, but all the time this is not going to give you what you are looking for. For example, you can see if you try to use link text, you have 21 matches, so you can't use it. So it will show all the possibilities that you can try to use to identify the web element. So it has used link test, it has used um, partial link test, it has used tag name, and it tried to show you all the possibilities. So you can't use the locators such as link test, partial link test, because they have multiple elements, web elements, when we use that locator. And you can finally choose the unique locator. So you can see you can choose relative CSS locator as a web locator because there is only unique element. You can use relative XPath, you can use uh, something like this in your JavaScript, and you can use absolute XPath as well as a locator to identify this web element. So this is uniquely identified, for example, using relative path. So selector has helped you in identifying the locator which you wanted to use to uniquely identify this download object, apart from many other download objects. So if you try to use the link text, you can't because there are multiple elements. So you have to use this relative XPath to uniquely identify that one. But mm, there is a catch over here. So this is the web table which will keep updating. For example, if there is another candidate added to this web table, then the row and column number will change. So in this particular case, it is going to be useful that you use relative XPath, but it's not going to be useful in later cases, right? So here your selectors hub tool is not helpful uh, in identifying locator, which is helpful. But as you can see over here, you will see that h reference value is a sort of unique for this web element. uh, I'll show you. Let me inspect another download link. You'll see this attach id is 2 for this web element, and it is 19 for that web element, which eventually tells you that you can use h reference value in order to identify the web element uniquely rather than this row number and column number, because when another candidate is inserted in table, this will change, but not this h reference id, as this is going to be unique. So that means you should be knowing how to create some XPath manually, which you are not getting from this selector subtool, right? So here, so I can use I mean, I know how to build an XPath so that this can be identified uniquely. See, it is unique, as you can see. So now I can use this one as a locator for my test to identify and download this particular resume by clicking on this web element, rather than this one which is given by selector subtool. So you will find the same thing if you used Chrome path, but you definitely don't find this one, right? So that is why it is important that the tools always may not be helpful in building your locators according to the test you wanted to test. So that's why it is really essential that you know the concepts first, and something which is not identifiable by the tool is something you can build if you know the concepts first. That is why let us know the what are the different web locators and how to build the web locators manually, so that you can use them in identifying the web elements uniquely when you wanted to automate certain application. All right, so let me close this one and let us discuss what are the web locators available in Selenium and Katalon first, and we'll see how to use them. And you can also find the list uh, in the below description. Okay, we are seeing over here many tags available. You can see class, you can see ID, we can see this is the link text. So this is a link hyperlink with an anchor tag. So we understand there is a tag name as well. We understand there is what else? Okay, there is name tag over here. So as you notice this web page, you're seeing different HTML elements, right? Which are there for each object or web element in this web page. So these are the unique identifiers which we are referring as locators, and primarily um, Selenium has 8 identifiers that are used as to locate an element. So ID, that is ID, first one. Second one will be name. It is not at this place. Second one will be name. Class name 3. Fourth one is going to be tag name. Fifth one will be uh, link text, this one, and sixth one will be partial link text, which means using some part of this text you can try to identify this web element. Seventh one is CSS locator, and eighth one is going to be XPath. So these are the different web locators which are available and supported by both Selenium and Katalon. So we'll try to use ID first in order to that will be our first choice in order to uniquely identify an element. If ID is not going to be unique, then we will try to use other locators. For example, this is the ID, and I try to search how many instances of that are available. You see, there is only one instance. That means ID use something which you can use uniquely to identify this web element, which is that D division box, as you can see over here. So similarly, you can use ID of this table to uniquely identify that particular web table element. So we can see this table is highlighted by this ID itself. So you can use ID as a web locator for this web element. So similarly, we have class. So you can use class name. If it is unique, you can use class name, and you can use the name as well, which is over here. So if it is unique, then you can use that one. Similarly, you can use tag name as tr for this web element, td for this web element, a for this web element, uh, and css selectors is something you can use for css selectors, and you can use xpaths. We know, right, the xpath. So we have seen already we built xpath manually uh, to identify this element using hrefs attribute. So there are many ways that we can use xpaths to identify the web elements. We can use okay, let us discuss uh, XPath mode, because other web locators are simple. You just have to find that attribute and you just use that as a locator. But XPath has very much depth to discuss, and we will also discuss about XPath Access, which are helpful, in dynamically identifying some web elements which can be identified only during the run stage, and they are not going to be static. Whereas when you are talking about dynamic, mm, there is two differentiation in the web locators. One is static locators, and second one are going to be dynamic locators. Most of the times, these web locators such as ID, tag name, name, class name are going to be static in nature, and XPath can be static as well as dynamic, as we see over here. If I wanted to see this one, we will see this XPath. This is static XPath, and we can make this XPath as dynamic by using this parameterization technique by passing some variables into this part, and you can make it as a dynamic um, locator. And there are many other concepts such as XPath accesses, um, which is nothing but finding your web element in relative to another web element. For example, if you wanted to find a resume of uh, this resume of Jennifer Clinton, when you are saying itself, you are referring this resume field with reference to this candidate, right? So that is the only way to identify this element and click on to download Jennifer Clinton's resume. So how that word is coming is by using the concept of relative XPath access. You can relatively choose a node in terms of HTML. We say that as a node. In terms of application, we say we can identify this web element with reference to its parent or sibling web element, right? So we'll discuss how do we do it. So there is nothing much to discuss about static locators. Now let us continue to discuss about dynamic locators, which is nothing but XPath. in one shot, right? So when I say dynamic, there are different ways in building a dynamic web element. In the previous video, you would have seen a concept of switching to Selenium in Katalon Studio, right? So there we have seen this concept already, wherein we try to find the web element, download, sync, and finding that element and click, right? So this is nothing but dynamic XPath. Doing this, we are creating the XPath dynamically each time when you go through the inner for loop over here. So in that way, we have traversed across this table by dynamically changing this XPath to identify different web element each time, and among that list you are trying to find your resume of Jennifer Clinton. That's what you have done, right? So that is how you define dynamic web element. That is one way using XPath, and we have also discussed the method to identify the same resume by using this concept of contains text. So mm, by using this contains text, which is helpful to build a dynamic XPath in relate to another web element. Similarly, you have already used this concept in the previous video, so you can refer to that video to understand it in detail. But here I'll explain at high level on how to use different web locators. Okay, I mean of Xpath access concept, I'm going to say. So okay, now let us go through this script and try to understand how I have used different web locators. So like we have seen, we tried to find the link text of Jennifer Clinton. This is unique, so this will help to identify Jennifer Clinton. With the help of Jennifer Clinton, I just verified whether it is Jennifer Clinton or not by getting the attribute of H-reference. So that's the code, and here, like I have shown, I have built this XPath using H-reference tag to uniquely identify that download link, and I can do certain operations, but here I prefer to use the concepts of Xpath Access, which is following siblings. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to identify siblings of this particular web element, which is this download. So I'm trying to identify the siblings of this particular node. So let's go to impact element. So this is the one here, and this is the current node, and the other nodes are over here, and we are talking about how the other nodes are placed with respect to our current node. So what I'm saying is I am trying to identify web element with respect to this current node, and my web element should be following this current node, and they are siblings of the following node, and they should have an anchor tag. That is what I am trying to say, and I'm going to print how many such elements are found. So that is one XPath access that I'm trying to use. And let us go to a different place wherein I'm choosing the web table, and I'm trying to find its descendants having anchor tag. So here let us go and see where is keyboard. So this is the web table, and I am telling that I wanted to identify this descendants of this particular node. Descendant means the ones which are following this one, and the ones which are following. I'm not trying to find the ones just following this one. I'm trying to find the anchor tags or hyperlink tags which are the followers of this table. So descendants, I mean to say. So I'm going to identify what are those, and I'm printing them in this piece of step. And the last step is uh, the following concept, same following concept to identify my resume and download it. So these are very few. If you wanted to know them in detail, I would say we have to go to this W3 school space, and this is the Xpath access which are available. So ancestry is one access name, ancestor or self, attribute, child, descendant, descendant or self, following. So these are all the different concepts, and you can see and know by yourself that ancestor means that you wanted to select all the ancestors of the current node. So if I use, where did I use ancestor? Did I use ancestor somewhere? Okay, I didn't use ancestor. So if I say this is my current node, and after slash, if I give ancestor in place of following sibling and followed by two columns, if I give the form which I wanted to find, whether it is hypertag, whether it is div element, or whether it is table row, whether it is cell td. So I can give any html tag over here, and I can use this XPath access to identify those locators. So I can use ancestor or self if I wanted to find all the ancestors of the current node and the current node itself. I can use child, descendant. So these are different ancestors, I mean, access available. You can see it in W3 schools which you wanted to use, but I'm not going to show all of them probably. But what I wanted to say is there is this concept called XPath access, which is helpful in building the locators dynamically so that you can uniquely identify a web element during its runtimes, which will not be static, right? So that's the point. So here I have tried to show you uh, one or two in Katalon Studio, and I have made all possible uh, XPath access concepts used over here in my Selenium script. I try to show how to use ancestor. So what I'm doing is I am logging into HRM page. In the first page itself, I'm trying to find elements, mm, and I'm trying to say that this is my current node, which is which is the login font probably, and I'm trying to find its ancestors. And I'm not trying to find all the ancestors, the ancestors of this particular web element, and the type of ancestor is the one with the div hrefs tab, HTML tab. So similarly, I try to show you how to use ancestor or self, how to use attribute or child um, of this current node, and it should be of form type. And similarly, descendants of this current node and descendants of or self of this particular current node, and following, how to use following. So this is just an example. You can try it yourself. All you need is you need to know a current node, and you wanted to use which concept of that current node and which type of element, HTML element you wanted to identify. So that's the syntax in general. So here are these examples over here just to show you, but you have to practice it, only then you will understand. And the reference for this is W3 schools XPath access concept. And why it is useful is like you see, when there are multiple elements and they are dynamically changing in nature, then this concept is uh, very useful for you, and it is something you will have to definitely deal with when you are working on your projects. And this is something which you won't find it in either selectors hub tool or the grow path, right? So you don't see it, right? We have already seen that example of knowing this web element which is changing dynamic in nature. So it is giving only the fixed path, but whereas you can use h reference as your unique identifier. And similarly you have seen an example of using the Xpath access concept to identify that element itself by using a single line to identify that download resume and download it. So let me run this script once again, both Katalon and the Selenium scripts and what it is returning when we use that Xpath access concept. And this is how you manually choose the locator, and why you have to know this way of doing things manually is that I have already shown you the examples which can't be identified by any tool such as CrowPath or Selectors Hub. And in my next video, we will discuss about how to use CrowPath and the Selectors Hub tool to uniquely identify the web elements by building the locators automatically using. You have already seen a part of Selectors Hub, but I'll explain in detail about how to use Selectors Hub and CrowPath as well with a comparative video. And they, I'm not saying that they are not useful. In this video, what I mean to say is, I mean to say there will be some chances that you wanted to build a locator manually. There, it is essential and important that you know how to deal it with manually. It doesn't mean that you don't have to use the selector sub or ProPath tool at all, because those tools are really helpful in quickly identifying the locators which you wanted to use. And not just, there is more. I'll explain that in a video. Now this script is run and it has clicked on the download button. I'm canceling this one and let us see what is printed. So the last element is about to click that resume. So you can see that I have used the Xpath access concept to identify that element uniquely instead of using mm, this relative Xpath suggested by this selectors hub tool. Okay, and it has worked. So right, and let us see what is printed. Okay. Okay, see here I have used this XPath and I have used something called contains text method, and the text should contain download. So it means I'm trying to identify the elements or links which are with the download tag, and it says the links are 21. There are 21 resumes, so that is correct, and I just tried to print them. So this is what is printed. That's fine, leave it. And another piece of code is I tried to print okay, number of elements matching are 0. Okay, so here I tried to find the element by tag name, which is web table, and tried to know how many web tables are there. There is only one web table, so number of web tables are 1. Before that, I tried to find siblings of this particular resume with a hyperlink. So it has returned me 0. And now let us see why it is 0. So this is the current node, which is this one, and I wanted to find following siblings of this current node with the anchor tab. Let us see what is following siblings mean. Following siblings means it has to select all siblings after the current node. So this is the current node, and after this current node it has to find its siblings. Siblings means brothers and sisters, which means this should have uh, a sibling. They should have a sibling having anchor tag form. And you see between these open and close of anchor tag, there is nothing such as another happen. That's why it has written 0 elements. So that means this has worked well, right? And here I'm trying to find the descendants of this web table, which is T body. Descendants means its followers. So let us go to web table. Where is web table? This is the web table. Okay, this is T body. I am trying to find its descendants. So this is where it opened, and this is where it is closed. Descendants. Let us see what is it descendants. Selects all descendants means its children, grandchildren, etc. of the current node. So this is the current node T body, and it is trying to identify its children and grandchildren. So this is the node, and its child is TR, and its grandchild is going to be TD, TD, all TDs inside this one. So if we say only child, TR will be the only child, and next TR will be another child. Since we said it is siblings, so descendants, and descendant means child as well as grandchild, it has to count what is inside the row. So what is inside the row is that the cell. So it will count this cell also as an element, and it will count this input is also another grandchildren. So it has to return all these elements when we say descendants of this particular T body, and we are going to print them. That's what we have done. So what it is doing is web table 0. So web table siblings is what I said, right? Okay. Web table sibling is that name. It has printed that name. So web table sibling 1 is download web table. Sibling 2 is Jennifer Clinton. And I wanted to print only the hypertabs. Ideally, when we say descendants, descendants will contain table row, table column, input. So there are many things, but I just wanted to print the hyperlinks inside this uh, descendant of this T body, which means it will print all these candidate names and all this download name. So that's what it is printing, the name of the candidate and the download. So that's what the descendant concept is for. Right now, I think you understand it pretty much clear. So that is what it is. And similarly, let me just run this in Selenium. It opened the orange HRM page, and here itself it will try to identify some elements using the Xpath Access concept. It failed because it is not okay. It is not able to identify something. So it has identified the ancestor using ancestor get id content. So it has identified ancestor of this login div form, and we try to identify ancestor or self of div type HTML tags, and it found three elements, and try to identify by attribute, try to identify the submit button, and it is printing its id. It has printed its id, which is btn login. That is correct. And next it is trying to identify child for this one. There are no childs, and that's why it is not able to get its attribute. So that's why it has failed. Since it has failed over here, it has failed to execute the others. Let me run it again. So when there is no child, it couldn't identify that element. So that's why if I use it in try catch block, I would see all the other steps. Now I commented that one. Now let us see. See, it has identified uh, descendants. Descendants of that one are 10. Descendant including that self is 11. Following, I mean, the nodes which are following that node are 9. And using namespace, the matching elements are 6. So this is just an example. I don't want to walk through each and every one. You can do it yourself. Just to tell you that okay, there is this concept which is very helpful to know it. Okay, in my next tutorial I'll explain about um, identifying the web locators using selectors hub and crowpath. Thanks for watching this video.
If you have any videos like this, please upload them in your Google Drive and share that link to us in that email given over here so that we can upload it for you with your name on it. And that way we can build a common repository where anybody can find solution to the problems which they are facing. Thanks for your support, and please subscribe to this channel if you wanted to see more videos like this. Bye.